One of the prominent sites that you see in the middle of St.Peter's Square in Rome is a massive 110-foot red granite obelisk. This obelisk is some 4,000 years old. It originally stood in the center of a pagan temple of the sun god Re in the Egyptian city of Hippolytus. It was brought to Rome in the year 37 AD by the ruthless Roman Emperor Caligula, who set it in the middle of what was Circus of Nero. A circus was a place in which people gathered where there was a track that they would have chariot races around. This site was used also, we know, as a place of persecution and martyrdom of the early Christians, including St. Peter himself. In ancient times, on this obelisk, a gold ball was on top, representing the sun. But after the fall of the Roman Empire, the ball at the top was replaced by a cross, which still stands today. And an inscription was added to the obelisk, which says, "Christ has conquered. Christ now rules. Christ now reigns supreme." I saw that image of the obelisk when I was in Rome in February. And each time I think of it, I'm reminded of all the human rulers, the pharaohs and worldly kings and presidents, powers that have come and gone throughout history. But Jesus Christ is King of heaven and earth. Today's feast reminds us that to reject Christ is to reject our only hope. To accept Christ is to accept salvation. For Christ is victorious over sin and death, and through the waters of baptism we are given the gift of everlasting life. Instituting today's feast, Pope Pius XI said, "When humanity recognizes both in private and in public life that Christ is King, society will at last receive the greatest blessings of real liberty, well-ordered discipline, peace, and harmony." Pius XI reminds us that we must bring Christ's wisdom, Christ's goodness, his grace, into every aspect of society, into every aspect of our lives. We are to be a light in the midst of darkness. Our gospel reading today offers us a rare look into how Jesus viewed the day of judgment. Growing up in Wapakoneta, my family raised sheep and goats for a while. And I always smile when I hear this reading from Matthew, because at home, goats were always the ones that would jump over the fence and wander off. They were very inquisitive and nosy creatures. The sheep, on the other hand, tended to stay together. They were easier to tend to and care for. In separating the sheep from the goats, Jesus highlights for us the importance of bringing together faith and life. We cannot be faithful people and be indifferent to the sufferings of others. Living faithfully means that we care for the least among us. Like a good teacher in today's gospel, Jesus repeats 4 times a litany of 6 deeds that focus on caring for the least among us. We know them as the corporal works of mercy. These deeds summarize for us what it means to live the great commandment, to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Sharing bread with the hungry, sheltering the oppressed and the homeless, clothing the naked. These are reflections of Jesus' own ministry. He feeds hungry crowds. He heals the sick. He speaks out against unjust systems that leave people naked, homeless, or all alone. In and of themselves, these deeds that Jesus highlights for us were not a surprise to the people who were listening to Jesus that day, because all of these were expected behavior for the faithful. The surprise was to whom these deeds were done. They were done to Jesus. Jesus says plainly, "I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink." Jesus is speaking in a very personal relationship quality. He's not talking in huge generalities of saying, "Okay, Angelo, you got to solve world hunger." He doesn't say, "You got to provide drinking water for an entire nation." No, he's calling us to look at the least among us. Christ is calling us to reach out in love to those who are our neighbors. And when you help others, something amazing happens. People begin to see Christ in you. Like a merciful teacher, Jesus, the Good Shepherd, lets us know what's going to be on the final exam, how we will be judged at the end of time. We will be judged on how well we have responded with compassion to those in need, to the least among us. The least among us might be someone physically hungry that we can reach out and help. But also the least among us who are hungry might be those whose lives are empty of meaning, and they're just drifting along in life, needing someone to mentor them, to accompany them, to show them the way to Jesus. The least among us might be indeed someone who is physically thirsty, or it could be someone who's lost all thirst for life. The least among us might be a stranger whose name is unknown to us, or it could be someone in our own home whom we've grown distant to. We become estranged. The least among us might be the naked who need winter clothing, as well as the least among us being someone who tries to cover over the hole in the soul with dysfunctional behavior. They need to know that they are loved. The least among us might be those who are physically ill, as well as someone who's lost all hope and is sick of living life. The least among us might be indeed those in a jail cell that we can visit, or they can be people who are prisoners to patterns of selfishness or abuse, and they need to break free from these problems. These are all ways that we can identify the least among us, and we have the responsibility and call to reach out in love. In this season of Thanksgiving, we recall that each one of us here today has been blessed in so many ways. We all belong to God, and all that we have, all that we are gifts to us from the Lord. We are simply stewards of these gifts of creation. Rather than getting caught up in criticizing what someone else is doing wrong, it's time for us to look into our own lives, to recall that each person will be judged on how well he or she has lived that call to compassion, those corporal works of mercy. No matter how challenging life may be, we can always trust that Jesus, the Good Shepherd, is leading and guiding us along the path of life. The cross of Christ reminds us of the tremendous sacrifice Christ gave for our salvation. The cross of Christ stands tall today as a reminder that Jesus Christ is victorious over sin and death. In him we shall live forever. Emeritus Pope Benedict XVI expressed this image well when he wrote, "Love of God and love of neighbor have become one. In the least of the brethren, we find Jesus himself, and in Jesus we find God."